when you have a document like the activity agreement, that you have something very concrete that you can go back and check on. This document is, very much the blueprint of what your volunteering is going to be.
Welcome to the Volunteer Support Podcast, brought to you by the European Union's co-funded project Promptus.edu, a collaboration between associations Audis Out Mori and Building Bridges.
Welcome back to Volunteer Support, the podcast series dedicated to helping volunteer abroad when embracing their journey within the European Solidarity Corps program. Welcome, I'm Melissa from Association Building Bridges, and today I'm with Jose Maria, our head of office. Welcome.
Hello, head of office and ex-coordinator of ESC volunteers. I'm very proud of that.
And that's why we are very happy to have you here today.
Yay!
Because we are going deeper into some related questions of the European Solidarity Corps program and our volunteers.
Awesome. Let's dive right in.
So today's episode is quite important, and I think that it will be very useful for those who are thinking about applying for a project, or for those who are now selected and they are waiting for this tool we are going to mention now. Because we will focus our episode on the volunteering agreement, which is basically a contract.
Yeah, that's literally what it should be viewed as.
Sometimes the names can change. It can be volunteering agreement, volunteering activity agreement, or some can call them activity agreement. But at the end, it is an agreement. And it is signed by the volunteers, the hosting organization, and also the supporting organization in many cases. We can define it as an agreement and as a contract, and it's very important. So I think it would be very interesting to talk about this document, to go deeper on the different sections we can find out.
Indeed. I always like to mention to the volunteers that I have this conversation. I said, this document is, very much the blueprint of what your volunteering is going to be. But I think also to the point of, what Promptus.edu has wanted to always sort of target, it's also the, if we look at when people or when a volunteer is having any issues, normally, mentally we go to what is my right? I have a right to. But I always say, in order for there to be rights, there's an obligation to do something in order for you to gain that right. You don't have a right just because. You have a right because, there's a contract in the middle. You promise to do something and you've committed to doing something.
Yes, we are talking about a contract which has rights, obligation, and important information regarding the project. And some important information we can find inside this document is, first of all, the data of the volunteer and the organization. We have the number of the project the volunteer has been selected for. We have the starting date, the end date, and we have also a lot of details regarding tasks. So all the activities that the volunteer will carry out during his volunteering or her volunteering project. And then we will have also information about vacation day, the working hours. You can find out all the information regarding schedule, timetables, and also rights and obligations, and information regarding the accommodation and pocket money and food. So it is really, really important to read it carefully before signing it.
Yeah.
Because if you have any doubts before signing the agreement, this is the moment to ask.
Right. And I mean, maybe we want to sort of take a step back, and let's start by, you've just mentioned the most crucial information that there is. And on the very first page is going to be all of that, technical information and specific information, regarding the project. And then, of course, of the actors involved. We know that there's always, three actors. There's the supporting organization, there's the hosting organization, And then there's the most important actor of them all, which is the volunteer.
And I will also add that there may be a coordinating organization.
As well.
Because sometimes we can have a coordinating organization coordinating different projects. So in your agreement, you will have details of the coordinating and then the ones of the hosting, which is the place where the volunteer will carry out effectively their activity.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, once we see that, then I think that the most important part is that central part where it states, the volunteer tasks and pertinent information to the actual volunteering period, be that the pocket money and the food money, if there is going to be any food money, or that's where it's going to say if they're going to give him or her the food and how often that's going to happen, etc., etc., etc. Some of these agreements can be very thorough. Most of them are quite detailed. And you said something, that at the beginning you said that's why you have to read them. And I think that's sort of the first thing that we need to indicate that you have to do.
Yes.
Because and we understand, there's a lot happening at that point. Because at the point that the volunteer receives the activity agreement, normally they're trying to book flights, they're asking questions, to their organization, or they're getting some kind of pre-departure training, and then they're trying to get their life in order, the life that they're getting ready to leave. So they're closing out a lot of things. So it could be very overwhelming to add, read this document on top of that. But you have to. You have to, because that's what you're agreeing to. We said in the past, in one of the episodes, I don't remember that you had invited me, but we said, don't be afraid, go out there, apply for volunteerings. There is no, there's no commitment until you don't agree and then sign exactly this document that we're talking. So at this point, there is a commitment. There's been promises made, and you can't go back on those promises. Mind you, nobody's going to be retained over, like if you need to change, it's not like, they're going to keep you somewhere. If something happens, of course, you're not, a prisoner of this agreement. But in principle, it is a contract, meaning there is an obligation. So the first thing you need to do is really make sure that whatever has been told to you during the interview, during the offer, what they told you about the accommodation, what they told you about your tasks. You need to make sure that all of that is there, explained in the same way that they explained it to you.
Of course, because this is also a way to set your own expectation. And it's both expectation to be set, the one from the hosting organization and the one from the volunteer. This document is clearly defining tasks, obligations, needs, necessity, everything that would be involved during the project.
Right.
So it's important to set expectation and see if those expectations are met.
Yeah.
Because an interview is an interview, and it's fine. A phone conversation can be fine too, but a contract is a document, and it's signed.
Right. And let's talk about how this document is. It's not a living document in the sense of it can be edited, because once it's signed, really, you shouldn't be able to change anything. I mean, that would counteract the idea of it being, a document that's been an agreement. But it is very much alive, meaning that it's always relevant during your volunteering.
Of course.
At the first part, it's relevant because, of course, the program has rules. There are set rules. But if there's been any flexibility, or the organization feels that that they needed to work differently with this volunteer because of the nature of the activities, the thing is, the rules, I don't like saying that the rules can always be broken, but the rules can always be, navigated around as long as the volunteer has agreed to that, And if any such agreement has been made, it needs to be reflected on that activity agreement.
Yes. And also, if there may be any change, it has to be reflected.
Right. For example, let's say that they said, listen, the program says that you can work 30 to 38 hours, but we have this additional activity that we sometimes do, and you're working precisely on that. So what we're going to do is that when you work that, we're going to turn that into a vacation day. For example, just to give you a silly example, that should be reflected,
Yes, of course. And also if there may be any change regarding how to take your vacation, which normally are 2 per month. And if you are going to work, for example, on bank holidays for any reason, for any necessity of the organization, because this organization is not an office, which has a normal schedule of work. And this may be reflected also in the volunteering agreement.
I guess we've all seen this, the case where the volunteer is at a school.
Yes.
And of course, they need those the school closes. So, this needs to be reflected that, listen, you can take some days, but we need you to take your vacation here. That as well, for example, should be reflected.
Yes.
And what this all does is because, it's a contract, like we said. But what this does, and the reason why I think it's always a relevant document, is because that is the agreement that both parties have come to. So in the emotional side, when a volunteer, normally, I think it happened to anyone. I mean, let's not point fingers at the volunteer because no, I think anybody really, if you're having any sort of issues or you're feeling any sort of way, you kind of lose sight of some of those things, especially if you signed that contract, 6 months ago, but then you're feeling a certain way. Maybe you've confronted certain conflicts or you're having a specific situation. Normally the first thing we go to when something isn't necessarily working right, but we don't know what it is that we try to assign that feeling of, insecurity or instability to something very concrete. That may not be the actual case. And that's where we have that exercise that I had told you about off air. But, we do try. We do try. So when you have a document like the activity agreement, that you have something very concrete that you can go back and check on and say, well, wait a minute, did they say I was going to do this? Or the organization can say to the volunteer, but wait, we agreed on this, we signed it, here's the activity agreement, and it says that there.
And here we go to the second tips we wanted to provide our listener to. Because the first one, we said it before.
Yeah.
Read it carefully.
Oh, please.
You receive it, read it carefully 3 times, 4.
Yeah.
5.
Plus, I think as a general life rule, don't sign anything that you haven't read before.
Yes.
I think just in general in life.
I think it would be a nice advice in general in life too.
Yeah.
But coming back to the agreement, another tips related to read it carefully before signing it is also, if you think that something is missing, some important information that you would like to know, but you are not aware of because it's not in the agreement, ask for it. There is not enough information regarding the accommodation, but you want to know how it will be, ask it.
Yeah.
So ask it. I will repeat 10,000 times. Ask it.
Right.
Because
right.
if something is not there, maybe it's not filling the model of the agreement and there was not enough space. But if you need to know this information because it's important, because set this expectation is helping you in deciding if you really want to participate, ask for it. Because it's important.
I mean, it depends on the organization, really, the activity agreement and how it's structured. Some of them can be very detailed. They should be very detailed because, as we've already mentioned, this is definitely a document that should be relevant. You should always be able to go back to that and see, well, wait a minute, what was I promised? As a volunteer, what was I promised? Or as an organization, to be able to say, hey, what did we agree upon with this volunteer? What was stated? That's why I really do prefer the very detailed,
Me too.
Activity agreements. But then I think maybe this is the third tip. I'm not sure.
No, we are still in the tip of before.
Okay.
Because I wanted to connect to what you were talking about.
Okay.
Because if we are saying that it's important to ask and read, but let's say, okay, you got all the information you were looking for, you signed your volunteering agreement, and now you are leaving to start your project. And then something happens, and you don't remember something, or you need to refresh, or you don't know how to organize your vacation, you don't remember how many days do you have, how many hours, you have a doubt. Come back to the agreement. This is the second tips I wanted to go. During your volunteering, the agreement will be your reference.
Yeah, always.
You can come back to the agreement and check and see if everything is going fine and see if you were remembered right or maybe not, because as you were saying, you sign it and then you put in a drive folder or in your document, and maybe you forget about the document. You sign it and you have it signed, keeping it, but maybe you forget all the things that were written.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, if we are talking about a long agreement with lots of details of 5 pages.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this is my second tip,
Yeah.
connected to what you were saying. Refer back to the agreement if you are facing any issues or uncertainties, and this can help also with conflict resolution. If there may
Yeah.
be any conflict going around some specific details that is not clear.
Yeah.
Clarity is important.
Yeah. And I mean, going back to that conflict that you just mentioned, even when you are in conflict, because I mean, this obviously the existence of this podcast has a reason. And that's because there's a lot of conflict that we experience with, our volunteers. And it mostly could probably revolve around things that are already in the activity agreement, mainly the volunteering activities. We get a lot of, I didn't know that it was going to be this, or they didn't tell me that I was going to be doing that. And, there's a conflict. All of a sudden, no, I wasn't told this. I wasn't. And it's like, well, no, you need to revisit, what did you sign? And we've heard it. We've been told before, like, oh, I didn't even read that. And you're like, well, again.
Please read document, because before signing it, if you are older than 18 years old,
Yeah.
because it can be used
It can
against
be
you
very
by
much
law.
against you. Yeah, for sure.
Not specifically this kind of agreement,
Right,
but
no,
in general,
but in life.
it's important to read documents before signing it.
Yes,
Because
as a
it's
general
our
rule,
signatures. I
yes.
mean, yes.
You're
This
no
is-
longer a minor in the eyes of the law.
I
So,
think this is the first thing my mother told me when I turned 18 years old.
yeah.
Read carefully whatever thing you are going to sign, because now you're not a minor.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Trauma. And now I'm reading everything and underlining everything
Yeah.
I'm going to sign.
Well, you know what? It's great that you mentioned underlining.
Ooh.
Oh, because I mean, most of the time it's going to be something emotional, or it could be something very concrete. Again, we have to understand that volunteering time can be very chaotic. It doesn't matter how good or how not good it's going. It's always chaotic in its own way. It's somebody that is not in their home country. They're not around their regular friends. They're not with their family. Everything is new every day, But whenever we're addressing issues, and, for you, the listener, if you're ever having, if you're right now listening to this and you're in your volunteering and any of what we've said is resonating with you, you're having some feelings about things that you're doing, things that you feel that you shouldn't be doing, or you just feel that in general, like the volunteering does not feel like it's very fulfilling because maybe you feel there's less tasks or you're not doing part of what you were told to do. Here's a great exercise. And this came from our friend Jorge up in the Basque Country. In case he's listening to this, we keep you very close to heart and we really appreciated this exercise. He called it making the... Oh, what's it called? The traffic light exercise, right? So what I want you to do is if any of this resonates with you, or you're feeling that you have any conflicts around what your volunteering is, your activities specifically, and they're making you feel a certain way, you feel that you're not doing or whatever, grab your activity agreement right now and then try to get 3 colored pencils or markers. Get 1 red, 1 green, and 1 yellow.
Yes, like the traffic lights.
Like the traffic lights, exactly. And then the first thing that you need to do is take your red pen and underline the things that you're not doing that are in your activity agreement. Then take the yellow one and underline the things that you're doing halfway. And then take your green one and then put everything that you are doing in green. And then see what that looks like, because that paints a very visual picture. Because you may think you're not doing that much, but you're probably doing a lot more.
Yes.
So I think that's a great exercise to do and a great sort of illustration of, how to approach an activity agreement.
And how to read it carefully and how to have a more visual appearance that can help to... Okay, this is happening. I'm doing this. It's not read. So I just forget.
Yeah.
That was what I was saying. I forget that I had this long list of things. And here they are.
Or maybe you're in that part of your volunteering where there's so much chaos. That's why I
Yeah.
mentioned there's so much chaos that you don't realize.
And during the daily routine, and because of the chaos or because the number of activities we are carrying out, sometimes we don't realize how many things we
Yeah.
are carrying out. And we are, okay, I'm doing this, and this sounds like nothing.
Yeah.
And then we grab the agreement and say, no, yes, those were the activities. I'm doing everything.
Right.
So
right.
I think I'm doing great, but I didn't realize because there is chaos, which is normal sometimes, because sometimes daily routine can also be
Yeah.
stressful, and being in a new environment can be
Yeah.
stressful too.
I think it also helps to sort of, by discarding the fact that, you're feeling a certain way, obviously. If you're doing that, you're feeling a certain way. But like I said at the beginning, sometimes we're attaching that feeling of something's not right, and we try to find the most concrete thing, and it's always going to be, oh, my activities are not working for me or whatever. Once you do that exercise, then I think there's a good reflection that you can and should make. It's like, okay, I did this exercise because I feel that something's wrong, and maybe I'm 90% sure that if you're doing that, you've probably found out that you're doing way more than you are. It could happen that you're doing way less, and then obviously, that validates. But what happens when you realize that you're not, that you are actually doing even more probably than is there? Then I think you have to have sort of a moment of reflection and ask yourself, where is this feeling really coming from? And I think that's a crucial part of that exercise, because it all sounds very practical, like, oh, green, red, yellow. But no, it's what do you do with that information afterwards? And it's like, listen, if you spotted a problem because you're either not doing anything of what you were said or you were promised, or you're doing way too much. But if you're doing everything and, you're like, well, wait a minute, everything is correct, then the next question is, why am I feeling like this? And maybe then you need to explore other aspects in order to get to the root cause of that feeling. But going back to the activity agreement itself, this is why this is such a great tool.
And it includes all the important information, all the relevant information on the rights and all the obligation.
Yeah.
And it's a way to set expectation of both the volunteer and the organization. And I think that it is really important to focus on this document without taking away his value.
Yeah.
Because it is an important tool.
Yeah. And don't wait till you're at your volunteering or in your volunteering to do that. Do that the minute that you get it, and then let it stay with you, because that, like you said, it sets the expectation. And if you have the correct expectation because you read it, because you were thorough about everything that you were committing to, then great, you've got the right expectation. But then once you're in your volunteering, if something's not going right, then do that exercise and revisit it, revisit your volunteering. And then like just to really drive that point home, there's no commitment to anything. You're not obligated to anything until you sign that agreement. It doesn't mean that agreement is a prison. You can still obviously be excused from it. But, this is an honor sort of, honor system. And if you've given your word and you've stamped your name, you should understand that that's the commitment that you've made, and that shouldn't be taken lightly.
And it's also a way to take your own responsibility and say, okay, I'm making this decision.
Right.
Am I sure or am not? Because I'm going to sign a document. It's not a prison, of course, but it's a responsibility and it's a commitment.
Indeed.
So I think that's more about thinking about the legal consequences, or if I broke,
Yeah.
I would...
Well, legal consequences, quote unquote,
Yes, but I would also encourage future volunteers to ask themselves, why am I doubting? Why am I already thinking what is going to happen if I break this contract?
Right.
Because maybe there is something deeper you may need to explore before going abroad.
Yeah.
If you are having doubts regarding the activities, it's fine, because you ask for your doubts, you set your expectation, and you can solve your doubts and say, okay, this is it, perfect.
Yeah.
We add this information and I can sign it and I'll see you in 3 weeks. Or maybe it can be the opposite and, oh no, it was not what I was looking for.
Yeah.
Maybe this is not my project. Thank you
Right.
for the opportunity, but this time it's not my time, and it's fine. Nobody's gonna hate you Because you are doing everything before signing it, before setting the expectation that you bought a flight to go.
Yeah.
But if your doubt is about, I would like to leave earlier after 2 months, what is going to happen if I leave, maybe you should reflect
Yeah.
on, why am I doing this? Am I ready? Even because if we are starting something beautiful, why are you already thinking about when everything will going to be bad?
Yeah.
That focusing on how can I implement the activity
Yeah.
and how can do it
Right.
better the experience.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, if you do have a chance to listen to this, I think it's a great thing to tell you, listen, it's natural as well to, you know, once you're in it, to, you know, ask the question of, well, wait a minute, how flexible is this? Everything is flexible, really, as long as you talk about it, you know? But you have to, you know, you have to assume the commitment, as you're saying, you know, and use this as a tool in order to really understand what you're getting into. And like you said, understand your time frame, your mind frame, sorry. Because if your first question is, like you said, you know, it's, well, what happens if I abandon this? It's like, well, why are you thinking about that? Like, I get contingency planning, don't get me wrong, and you should always plan for contingency.
This is the question I would like volunteers to ask themselves. Am I thinking this as contingency plan? So if happens something, I want to know that there is a B plan. Everything can happen everywhere and every time. But what if you are asking yourself because you are already thinking about leaving?
Right.
And maybe can be also a starting point of reflection. That
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you are not going to go, but just reflect about this, because maybe it can open more doors
Yeah.
and make you able to understand better yourself and why you choose this experience. And it's fine to be scared and think about, okay, what happened if in 2 months I want to go back home? It's fine to be scared. Fears
Yeah.
go along with expectation. They are best friends. Sometimes they can
Yeah.
be
Interchanged.
interchanged, but they are best friends. They always go together. So it's fine too.
Yeah.
But just ask this question to do a reflection.
I like that. I really like that, because it's like, if it's a contingency planning, I mean, that's okay. Always plan. But if what you're looking for is to have an exit strategy, then maybe you want to think about stuff a little bit more. Perfect. Well,
I think that we said a lot. We were talking a lot about this agreement. So I hope that we really put the attention on the fact it's important to sign, but it's important to read before signing.
Yeah. That's
Documents.
There is a takeaway.
And the other thing I will leave our listener to is to ask if you have a doubt. If it's true that fears and expectation are best friends, it is true that we can be their best friend by asking questions and solving our doubts.
Yeah, for sure.
So thank you, Jose, for participating in this podcast. I think that your contribution were really, really useful. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I mean, I love being here with you. I love what this project is doing, and I love that I think this is really going to help hopefully a lot of, you know, future volunteers to really confront this whole process.
Related to this, I remember to our listeners that if they have any question or doubts, they can also contact us through our webpage or through our podcast platform. You can also leave messages on Spotify and other podcast platforms. So ask, and we will be happy to answer and help you during your volunteering journey. Thank you.
Bye. Have a great volunteering.